The airport hummed with the restless pulse of midnight, that peculiar hour when time feels suspended between what was and what could be. Fluorescent lights washed everything pale and sleepless, stripping color from the world and leaving only motion. Rolling suitcases, blinking gate signs, a steady tide of people chasing destinations. Maya Ellis stood among them, heart light and stomach fluttering, clinging to a version of the future she'd spent months imagining. Paris. The city of promises. The place where, if her guesses were right, Ethan would finally ask her to spend the rest of her life with him. She'd spent weeks planning every detail. Soft pink lipstick for champagne mornings, silk for candlelit dinners, a black dress for the night she was certain he'd slide a ring across the table. She could almost hear it now, that breathless confession. I can't imagine another sunrise without you. The thought warmed her as she adjusted the strap of her carry-on and checked the time on the departures board. Flight 217 to Paris. On schedule. Everything was perfect. Then her phone buzzed. It was such a small thing, a tiny vibration against the palm of her hand, a momentary flicker on the screen. But the words that followed split her life cleanly into before and after. Can't do this anymore. Sorry. At first, they didn't make sense. She blinked, waiting for the rest. A follow-up, an explanation, some desperate attempt to soften the blow. None came. The words hung there, simple and final, and then they began to fall. Not all at once, but slowly, like ash from a fire. She called. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Her hands trembled as she typed. Where are you? We board in 28 minutes. Please tell me this is a mistake. The message was delivered. It was never read. The world around her kept moving. People laughed, hugged, argued, ordered overpriced coffee, a tea. Nager giggled on a FaceTime call. A couple held hands in the boarding queue, and Maya stood in the middle of it all, staring at a gate where the future she had built in her head was supposed to arrive, but the seat beside her remained empty. Final boarding for Flight 217 to Paris, the agent called cheerfully. Maya's name blinked on the screen. Ellis, Maya, Seat 2A. It looked so precise, so inevitable. She didn't move. She couldn't. The jet bridge sealed, the door closed, and through the glass she watched the plane taxi into the darkness without her. The world didn't end with a crash. It just left. By the time she stumbled into a cluster of empty chairs at a darkened gate, her legs felt like they didn't belong to her. The terminal's night shift population, businessmen in rumpled suits, exhausted families, a woman curled under a coat, blurred around her. She dropped into a seat, buried her face in her hands, and let the tears fall, because there was no reason left to stop them. Excuse me, a voice said gently. It wasn't sharp or intrusive. It was low and warm, threaded with an accent that softened the edges of each word. She looked up to find a man standing a few feet away, hands clasped loosely behind his back as though he'd practiced not to appear threatening. You look like you might need someone to ask if you're all right, he said. He was the kind of handsome that made the rest of the world fade, tall, dark-haired, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection. But it was his eyes that held her. Brown, steady, patient, not demanding answers, just offering space. I'm waiting for someone, she said, her voice hoarse. Or I was. His gaze flicked toward the gate number glowing behind her. Not here, he said softly. That flight left 2 hours ago. Heat flooded her cheeks. The person I was waiting for decided not to show up. Ever, apparently. I'm sorry, and he said, and somehow it sounded like he meant it, like he understood the ache of being left behind. He hesitated, then gestured to the empty seat beside her. May I? She nodded. He sat one chair away, leaving just enough space to respect her sadness. My name's Dante, he offered. Dante Marino. Maya, she murmured. They shook hands. His was warm, steady, grounding. I've been where you are, he said after a moment. Midnight, a terminal, the bottom dropping out. It helps when someone sits down. Do you have somewhere to go tonight? I had Paris, she said, a humorless laugh escaping. Now I have Chicago, and a weekend of pretending I'm fine. He checked the time. My flight leaves in 15 minutes. Private gate, New York. His eyes met hers again, careful and unreadable. Come with me. She blinked. I'm sorry, what? One night, separate rooms, no expectations. You can fly home tomorrow if you want. He lifted his hands in mock surrender. I'll show you my ID, my business card, my mother's phone number if it helps. Her phone was still silent. No messages, no explanations, just silence. Every instinct screamed caution, but another voice, smaller, braver, whispered something else. What if safe is what got you here? What's the worst that happens? Dante asked softly. You fall asleep over the Atlantic and wake up in New York, or you say no and go home feeling like this all night. The decision hung in the air between them, and for the first time since the text that shattered her world, Maya felt the faintest pulse of possibility. The plane that should have been gliding her toward Paris was a silver speck vanishing into the night sky when Maya finally followed Dante Marino through the service corridor of LAX. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, that heartbreak did not excuse reckless decisions, and yet every step she took felt like peeling back another layer of the life she'd been hiding behind. By the time they stepped out onto the private tarmac, the cool air stung her cheeks and the scent of jet fuel hung heavy around them. A sleek jet crouched before them, its engines humming like a beast ready to run. Two men in black waited near the stairs, their eyes scanning every shadow, their movements too practiced to belong to mere employees. This was not a trip. This was a threshold, and Maya was about to cross it. Inside, the jet was quieter than she expected, the cabin wrapped in cream leather and soft amber light. It was the kind of space meant to erase the outside world. Dante removed his jacket and draped it neatly over the back of a chair before loosening his tie, the gesture too fluid to be rehearsed. Maya sank into a seat that seemed designed to cradle vulnerability and stared out the window as the engines roared to life. Los Angeles fell away beneath them like a city of broken promises. Her phone buzzed once. Lena, her best friend, but she ignored it. For now, she wanted the noise to fade. Water? Tea? Dante asked gently from across the cabin. Water, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. They flew through silence for a while. It wasn't the awkward silence of strangers, but the kind that sits quietly beside you when words would only make things heavier. Eventually, Dante spoke again, his tone lighter than the weight of his presence. You're very brave, he said. She almost laughed. For getting on a stranger's jet? For not letting someone else decide how your story ends, he said. That's rarer than you think. She studied him, searching for the cracks beneath his polished exterior. He was too calm, too controlled. Every move seemed deliberate, every word measured. Yet something lived behind his eyes, something coiled and dangerous, like a lion pacing behind glass. What is it you do exactly? She asked. I run a logistics company, he replied without hesitation. But there was a pause, a slight flicker in his gaze, and she knew. There was more he wasn't saying. It's not as boring as it sounds. What kind of logistics require armed guards at midnight? She pressed. His lips curved into a faint smile. The kind where you can't afford mistakes. The conversation shifted. He asked about her work, and she told him about the pediatric ward, about the tiny hands that clung to life and the parents who aged a decade in a single night. As she spoke, he listened without interruption, without judgment. Most men she dated would have changed the subject by now, bored by the details of her world. Dante leaned in closer, eyes intent, as if every word she spoke mattered. But beneath the warmth of their conversation, shadows moved. Twice, the man seated near the cockpit touched his earpiece and murmured something under his breath. Once, the cabin lights dimmed and Dante's phone buzzed with a message that made his jaw tighten before he silenced it. Maya noticed, and the quiet voice of caution stirred again. "Do you always travel with bodyguards?" she asked. "It's complicated," he said, which wasn't an answer at all. Then, softer, "There are people who don't like the way I'm changing things." "Changing what?" He didn't reply. Instead, he looked out the window, where night stretched endlessly ahead, and for a moment the distance between them felt impossibly wide. They landed just before dawn. The world outside was wet with rain and tinted in shades of blue. As they stepped off the jet, a black SUV rolled to a stop beside the stairs. A driver stepped out, crisp and silent, opening the door without a word. Maya hesitated. "You can still walk away," Dante said quietly. "I'll put you on the next flight home." But she didn't move. Something had shifted inside her. The woman who had waited at gate 15 no longer existed. The one standing here was curious, cautious, and, for the first time in years, unafraid of not knowing what came next. The city swallowed them whole. Manhattan's skyline rose like steel teeth against the pale morning, its street. It's alive, even at dawn. They drove in silence, weaving through avenues where power wore suits and danger hid in the spaces between stoplights. Dante's phone buzzed again. This time he answered, speaking Italian in a low, clipped tone. Maya caught fragments, names, times, places. And though she didn't understand the words, the tension in his shoulders told her enough. When he hung up, his expression had changed. Colder, sharper. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, but his eyes betrayed the lie. "I just need to make sure you stay safe." Safe. The word felt heavier than it should, and as the SUV slid into an underground garage beneath a building that looked more like a fortress than a hotel, Maya couldn't shake the sense that she had stepped into a story far larger than her own. She followed Dante into an elevator lined with mirrors, and as the doors slid shut, she caught her reflection. A woman who had been abandoned hours ago now standing beside a man whose world ran on secrets. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the unmistakable pull of destiny. And in that mirrored cage, as the elevator climbed toward whatever awaited above, Maya understood one undeniable truth. She wasn't going home. Not yet. The rain had stopped by the time the elevator doors slid open, but the city above still wore the bruises of a storm. Water pooled in the cracks of the pavement outside, neon lights smeared across the wet streets like paint on glass. Maya followed Dante out into a marble-floored lobby so polished it looked like it had been built to reflect power. Men in suits greeted him with nods that lingered a fraction too long. Women behind the concierge desk straightened as he passed, and the doorman outside stepped forward with the reverence usually reserved for royalty. Everyone knew him. Everyone adjusted themselves around him. The SUV that waited by the curb was no ordinary car. Its windows were dark, its engine barely audible, its presence commanding. Two men were already inside, both dressed in black, both with the stillness of people who watched everything without ever being seen. Maya slid into the back seat beside Dante, and as the door shut behind her, it felt less like entering a vehicle and more like stepping into a sealed world. They drove through the veins of New York, the skyline rising around them like a jagged crown. Dante spoke quietly on the phone, the Italian flowing like water, but there was a tension to his words now, a rhythm that told her every syllable mattered. When he hung up, the silence in the car grew heavier. Maya studied his profile, the way his jaw tightened as if bracing against something unseen. "You can ask," he said, without looking at her. "Ask what?" "What you're really thinking, who I am, what I do. Why there are men in this car who'd throw themselves in front of a bullet before they'd let you touch a door handle." She hesitated, then exhaled. "All right. Who are you, Dante?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. The city blurred past outside the tinted glass, a kaleidoscope of lights and secrets. Finally he spoke. "I was born into a family that doesn't get to choose who they are. We own businesses, we sign contracts, we move things from one place to another. Some of those things are legal, some of them aren't. My father built an empire before I could walk. I grew up knowing loyalty was worth more than law." Maya's pulse quickened. "You mean... Mafia?" His lips curved into a humorless smile. That's what the movies call it. We call it survival. The SUV slowed as it turned down a quiet street lined with towering brownstones and iron gates. They stopped outside a building that looked more like a fortress than a residence. Guards flanked the entrance, their eyes sweeping the street before one of them nodded and opened the door. "Where are we?" Maya asked. "Home," Dante said simply. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. The hallway was lined with portraits of men with the same sharp jawline and steady eyes as Dante, generations of power carved into oil and canvas. But it wasn't the art that unsettled her. It was the silence, heavy and deliberate, like the house itself was listening. A woman appeared from a side room, elegant in black silk, her hair streaked with silver. She smiled when she saw Dante, but the smile faltered slightly when her gaze landed on Maya. "Madonna mia," she murmured, switching to English with ease. "You brought someone home." "Mother, this is Maya," Dante said gently. "She's staying with us for a while." His mother's eyes softened, but there was calculation behind them too. "Welcome, my dear," she said. "I hope you're not easily frightened." The words seemed casual, but they lodged in Maya's chest like a warning. Later, when Dante showed her to a guest room overlooking Central Park, she lingered by the window long after he left. The view was beautiful, but it felt like a cage made of glass and skyline. She pressed her forehead against the cool pane and wondered how a man she'd met less than a day ago already felt like both sanctuary and storm. Her thoughts were interrupted by a buzz on her phone. Unknown number. She frowned and opened the message. "Leave now while you still can. He's not who you think he is." Her heart lurched. The message had no signature, no clue who had sent it. But before she could process it, another buzz. "A man will die tonight because you stepped onto that plane." Her fingers trembled. She turned away from the window and scanned the room. Everything suddenly felt wrong. Too quiet, too staged, too dangerous. The door creaked open and Dante appeared, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" She swallowed hard. "Someone texted me." He crossed the room in 2 strides and held out his hand. "Show me." She hesitated, then handed him the phone. His jaw tightened as he read. "This isn't about you," he said finally. "It's about me." "Then why mention me at all?" "Because you're with me," he said, his voice low. "And that makes you leverage." The room seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She had known there was danger in following a stranger onto a jet, but she hadn't realized that danger had been waiting for her before she even stepped aboard. "Pack a bag," Dante said suddenly. "We're leaving." "Leaving? Where?" "Somewhere safer," he said, though his tone told her safety was a relative concept in his world. "Someone just declared war, and they plan to use you as the first shot." The city lights outside burned brighter as night fell, but the glow felt colder now. Maya stood frozen in the center of the room, her suitcase still zipped by the door. Somewhere deep down, she understood that this was the moment she could walk away. But when she met Dante's eyes, sharp, protective, and haunted, she knew she wouldn't. Whatever storm was coming, she was already in its path, and turning back was no longer an option. The rain returned by dawn, washing the city in sheets of silver that blurred the skyline and swallowed the streets below. Maya hadn't slept. She had spent the night pacing the guest room, staring at the text messages over and over, replaying Dante's words in her head. Someone just declared war. It sounded unreal, like a line from a film. But every glance at the guarded hallways outside, every faint click of boots on the marble floor reminded her that this was no fiction. She was inside a world where whispers started wars and people vanished before sunrise. Dante knocked once before stepping in. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. He wore black tactical clothes, his hair swept back, his face close, older than she had ever seen it. It wasn't the face of the man who had offered her water on a plane. This was someone else, someone born to command. "We leave in 15 minutes, he said. "Where are we going?" To a place where they can't reach you, he said simply. But the way he checked his watch, the way his eyes scanned the corners of the room, told her this was more than a relocation. This was an extraction. The SUV they entered was different too. Heavier, armored, windows darker than before. The streets of Manhattan blurred by, but the route felt strange. They weren't heading toward airports or safe houses. They were going somewhere deeper into the city, somewhere the traffic thinned and the architecture turned older, quieter, more dangerous. "Why aren't we leaving New York?" she asked. "Because I'm not running," he said, "and neither are you." They stopped outside an abandoned warehouse tucked between two high-rise construction sites. It looked deserted, but Maya could feel eyes watching them as they stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and rain-soaked steel. And then she saw them. Men and women in dark suits, gathered around a long table. Maps, surveillance photos, and a digital blueprint of a city block glowed on screens. "This is my world," Dante said quietly. "Not the suits, not the jets. This." A man stepped forward, his face lined and scarred, his gaze locked on Dante with a soldier's respect. "They hit our shipment on Pier 46, 2 men down, 1 missing." "Who?" Dante asked. "Luca." Maya didn't know who Luca was, but the way Dante's jaw clenched told her he was more than just another name. "They're getting bolder," the man continued, "and they knew we'd be here. Someone inside is talking." A traitor. The word hung unspoken in the air, chilling Maya to the bone. "Double security on all fronts," Dante ordered. "No one leaves without Clea, Rance, and I want eyes on Russo. If he's behind this, I'll end it before he makes his next move." The name jolted her. Russo. She had heard it before, whispered in one of Dante's late-night phone calls, uttered like a curse. Whoever Russo was, he wasn't just an enemy. He was the kind that didn't stop until the ground was soaked in blood. As the meeting ended, Dante pulled Maya aside. "I need you to trust me," he said. "Everything from this point on will feel wrong. It will feel dangerous. But I will keep you alive." "Why me?" she whispered. "Why would they care about me?" "Because you're the only thing they know they can use to control me," he said. "They don't care who you are. They care what you mean to me." The words hit harder than she expected. They weren't romantic. They were a warning. Hours later, they returned to the penthouse, but it no longer felt like a sanctuary. The security detail had doubled. Every window was reinforced. Even the air felt tense, charged, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Maya's phone rang once, a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Maya Ellis," a male voice said, calm and measured. "I hope you're enjoying your new life." Her blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants you to deliver a message. Tell Dante Marino that if he doesn't hand over what belongs to us, the next time you hear my voice, it will be the last thing you hear." The line went dead. Her hands shook as she told Dante what happened. He didn't speak. He just stared at the city through the glass wall, jaw clenched, eyes dark with calculation. "They know your name," he said finally, "which means they know where you live, where you work, and who you care about. This is no longer about me. It's about you." "What do they want?" He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. "A file," he said. "One my father hid before he died. It contains every deal, every betrayal, every secret of the Moretti family. If it falls into Russo's hands, the city burns. And if you don't give it to them, they'll start with you." The city lights flickered beyond the glass, but Maya no longer saw them. Every heartbeat pounded louder than the last. She had stumbled into a story written in blood and vengeance, and now her name was part of it. Somewhere in the dark, a war was being prepared, and whether she liked it or not, she was standing at the very center of it. The city never truly slept, but that night, New York felt different. It was as if the streets themselves sensed the storm that was about to break. Helicopters traced silent arcs over the skyline. Black cars prowled through alleys without headlights, and beneath the glow of every streetlight, someone was watching someone else. Maya stood by the window of Dante's penthouse, staring down at a city that suddenly felt too big, too alive, too dangerous. Every flicker of movement made her pulse quicken. Every passing shadow could be the last thing she ever saw. She hadn't told anyone where she was. Not Lena, not her co-workers, not a single soul. Her world before Dante, the safe, quiet world of pediatric wards and morning coffee and plans for Paris, felt like a dream someone else had lived. Now there was only this, encrypted phones, armed guards, and a name she had never known before, whispering through the city like smoke. Russo. Dante appeared behind her without a sound. He had changed again. No longer the polished businessman, no longer the gentle stranger from the airport. Tonight he was the heir his enemies feared. Black shirt, holstered weapon, eyes like tempered steel. "They moved," he said quietly. "Russo's men hit one of our warehouses in Queens. They're not looking for the file. They're looking for leverage." "Leverage?" Maya asked, though. She already knew the answer. "You," he said. A cold weight settled in her chest. "Then why am I still here? Why not send me away? Hide me somewhere?" "Because hiding you doesn't stop them," Dante said. "Ending this does." He walked to the large oak table in the center of the room and unfolded a map of the city. Red dots marked strategic points, warehouses, safe houses, shipping routes, and there, at the center, was a single black X. "This is where they'll take you if they succeed," he said, pointing to the mark. "An old textile factory near the East River. It's Russo's stronghold." Maya's hands trembled. "How do you know that?" "Because that's where they took my brother before they killed him," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. It was the first time he'd spoken about his brother. She saw the shift in his expression. Not grief, but rage carved so deep it had become part of him. "Russo didn't just kill him," Dante continued. "He made him beg, and then he sent a message. This isn't business for him, it's revenge." The air between them thickened, heavy with the weight of truths she hadn't asked for. Maya wanted to tell him she was scared, that she didn't belong here, that she was just a nurse who had made one impulsive choice at an airport. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down she knew the truth. There was no going back now. The knock on the door was too soft for a friend and too deliberate for a stranger. Dante's men drew their weapons instantly. One of them peered through the peephole and stiffened. "It's him," he said. "Ethan." Maya's heart stopped. Ethan, the man who had shattered her life with a single message. The man she hadn't spoken to since that night. "Let him in," Dante said, though his voice was ice. Ethan stepped inside slowly, dressed in a cheap jacket that looked out of place among Dante's tailored world. His eyes found Maya immediately, desperate, searching, maybe even guilty. "Maya," he breathed. "Thank God you're alive." "Why are you here?" she demanded, backing away. "How do you even know where I am?" "Because they came to me," he said. "Russo's men. They know everything. Your name, your job. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill you." "Cooperate how?" Dante asked sharply. Ethan's eyes flicked toward him and then back to Maya. "They want you to come with me. They said they'd trade you for the file. No one else gets hurt." Dante stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them I'd try," Ethan whispered. "I told them I'd convince her." Maya's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. It was happening exactly as Dante had warned. She was the pawn on the board, and Russo was moving his pieces closer with every breath. "Get out," Dante said coldly. "And tell Russo if he wants a war, I'll bring it to his doorstep." Ethan didn't move. "Maya, please," he begged. "If you don't go with them, they'll kill me. They'll kill my family. This isn't about us anymore." It was the look in his eyes. Not guilt, but fear, that twisted something inside her. And for a brief, terrifying moment, she considered it. She considered walking out that door and ending this before it swallowed more lives. But Dante stepped between them. "If you go with him, you die," he said. "Russo won't trade. He'll use you to destroy everything, and I won't let that happen." "Then what do we do?" she whispered. Dante turned toward the window, watching the rain fall harder now, the city lights blurring behind the glass. "We stop running," he said. "We find the file before they do, and then we burn their empire to the ground." In that moment, Maya realized the war had already begun. The question wasn't whether she could survive it. It was how far she was willing to go to see it end. And somewhere deep inside her, a spark of resolve flickered to life. She was done being leverage. She would become the reason Russo's empire fell. The night bled into morning with no trace of peace. Every hour brought new reports, new sightings, new threats. Dante's network was working overtime, intercepting messages, tracing shipments, and planting eyes in places Maya didn't know existed. Yet despite all of it, Russo's men remained 2 steps ahead. It was as if they already knew every move before Dante made it. Someone was feeding them information from inside. Maya sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the city below. The sky was painted in bruised shades of gray, and rain lashed against the windows like a warning. She had barely slept, haunted by Ethan's desperate face and Dante's vow to burn Russo's empire down. The war wasn't just approaching. It was already here, and she was at its heart. Dante entered the room carrying a folder, his expression darker than the storm outside. He dropped the papers onto the table between them. Inside were old photographs, documents, and faded newspaper clippings. "I think it's time you saw this," he said. Maya picked up the top photo. It was black and white, decades old. 2 men stood side by side in tailored suits, their smiles thin and insincere. One of them was Dante's father, Giovanni Moretti. The other made her blood run cold. "That's my father," she whispered. "Yes," Dante said quietly. 30 years ago, our fathers made a pact. Your father wasn't just a bystander. He was part of this world. Deeply part of it." She shook her head, refusing to believe it. "My father was a mechanic. He fixed cars. He hated violence." "He fixed more than cars," Dante said. "He fixed engines for our fleet, moved shipments under the radar, laundered money through his garage. And when he tried to walk away, Giovanni made sure he never could." The room tilted beneath her. Memories flashed. Her father's mysterious late-night calls, the men in suits who used to visit the house, the car accident that killed him when she was 16. Only now did the puzzle pieces begin to fit. "Are you saying my father was murdered?" Dante's silence was her answer. The truth hit her harder than any threat Russo could make. Her father had been part of the same world she now found herself in, trapped by choices she never knew he made, and now, decades later, that same world was reaching for her. But the revelations didn't stop there. Dante pulled another document from the folder. A handwritten agreement stained with age. It was a blood pact, signed by both Giovanni Moretti and Richard Ellis. The terms were simple, but horrifying. If one family failed to honor their part of the deal, the other would claim their heir as collateral. "Collateral," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's why Russo wants me. It's not just leverage. It's debt. And it's why my father wants you dead," Dante added grimly. "Because as long as you live, the pact is unfinished." The room fell silent, except for the steady rhythm of rain against the glass. For the first time since this nightmare began, Maya felt the weight of destiny pressing down on her. This wasn't about love or betrayal anymore. This was blood history. Old promises written in violence and sealed in death. "What happens if we find the file?" she asked finally. "We end it," Dante said. "The ledger contains every deal, every betrayal, every name tied to the Moretti syndicate. If we release it, we dismantle their empire piece by piece. And if we don't, then they come for you, and they don't stop until one of us is dead." Before Maya could respond, the room exploded into chaos. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and armed men flooded the hallway. One of Dante's guards burst through the door. "We've been breached! They're inside! Dante pulled Maya to her feet and shoved a gun into her hands. Stay behind me, he ordered. Gunfire shattered the silence. The penthouse windows blew inward, raining glass across the floor. Shadows poured through the breach, men in black with Russo's insignia stitched into their sleeves. Dante fired back, moving with lethal precision, the air filled with the smell of smoke and gunpowder. Maya ducked behind an overturned table, heart pounding. This wasn't a threat anymore. This was war, right here in front of her. She clutched the weapon with shaking hands and tried to remember how to breathe. Move! Dante shouted, grabbing her wrist. They sprinted through the smoke, down a back staircase, and into a hidden corridor she hadn't known existed. The walls trembled with the impact of explosions above. Where are we going? She gasped. To the archives, he said. The ledger is hidden there. If they want it, they'll follow us. And that's where we make our stand. They emerged into a dimly lit chamber deep beneath the building. Dust coated the air. Ancient filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer holding decades of secrets. Dante knelt before a steel safe embedded in the floor and began to work the lock. But before he could finish, a voice echoed through the chamber, smooth, cold, and laced with venom. Going somewhere, Marino? Maya froze. A tall man stepped from the shadows, his smile sharp as a blade. She had never seen him before, but she knew instantly who he was. Russo, Dante growled. In the flesh, Russo said, his eyes sliding to Maya. And look at that, the debt collector and the debt herself, standing side by side. Poetic, isn't it? The tension crackled like static. Dante reached for his weapon, but Russo was faster. Men stepped out from behind the shelves, guns raised, fingers poised. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Hand over the ledger, Russo said, or watch her die before you can even open that safe. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. The hunter had become the hunted, and the war that had been simmering beneath the surface was about to explode. The chamber felt colder with Russo standing in it, like the air itself bent to his will. Every muscle in Maya's body tensed as his men fanned out, their weapons trained with ruthless precision. Dante's hand hovered near his gun, but he didn't move. He was calculating, assessing, searching for a weakness. But Russo had none. Not here. Not now. Put the gun down, Marino, Russo said softly, his voice almost casual. I'd hate for her to die before she understands just how much blood she was born into. Maya's pulse thundered. Dante didn't move, didn't speak. His silence was louder than any words. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon and let it clatter onto the floor. Russo's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Good, Russo said. Now, the ledger. Dante's eyes burned with quiet defiance. You kill me the moment you get it. Russo shrugged. Maybe, but if you don't give it to me, I start with her. And I don't mean a clean death, Dante. I mean screams that echo under this city until every man in your family hears them. The room spun. Maya forced herself to meet Russo's gaze. His eyes were cold and empty, the kind of eyes that had watched people die and felt nothing. She realized then that this man wasn't bluffing. If Dante handed over the ledger, he'd die. If he didn't, she would. Dante, she whispered, do it. No, he snapped. I won't lose you. You'll lose everything if you don't, she said, her voice shaking but firm. It's a piece of paper. I'm not worth a war. Yes, you are, he said, and for a moment all the danger, all the hatred in the room faded beneath the raw weight of his words. Russo's patience wore thin. He gestured to one of his men. Bring him. The steel door slammed open, and 2 guards dragged someone into the chamber. Maya's heart stopped when she saw who it was. Ethan. His face was bruised and bloodied, his eyes glassy from Wallos. Whatever hell they'd put him through. Look familiar? Russo asked with a smirk. Our mutual friend here had quite a lot to say once we started breaking bones. He told me where you were hiding the ledger. He told me about the safe house in Brooklyn. He even told me about the cop you're paying off. Dante's face hardened. You're lying. Am I? Russo asked. Ask him yourself. Ethan tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken cough. I didn't mean to, he rasped. They said they'd kill her. I just wanted her safe. Maya's knees nearly gave out. Ethan had betrayed them. Again. And yet the pain in his eyes wasn't hatred. It was regret. Russo turned back to Dante. Here's my final offer. Give me the ledger, and I'll let both of them live. Refuse, and I'll kill them both right now. The chamber fell silent. Every second stretched into eternity. Dante stared at Maya, then at Ethan, then back at Russo. Finally, he exhaled and knelt by the safe. The heavy door groaned as he turned the final lock, but when he opened it, it wasn't the ledger that lay inside. It was a detonator. "What the hell is that?" Russo hissed. "A promise," Dante said. "You think you're the only one willing to burn everything down? I wired this place with enough explosives to take out 3 city blocks. You want the ledger? Fine. But we all die here together." The room erupted into chaos. Russo shouted for his men to stand down. Guns were raised. Fingers hovered over triggers. Maya's breath caught in her throat. One wrong move and the chamber would become a tomb. "You wouldn't," Russo sneered. "Try me," Dante said, his thumb resting lightly on the switch. "I'm done playing your games. This ends now, one way or another." A tense silence fell. Then Russo laughed, low and bitter. "You've changed, Marino. You used to be your father's son. Now you're just a man willing to die for a woman who doesn't belong in this world." Maybe she doesn't belong," Dante said, "but she's the only thing in it worth saving." Russo's smile faded. His men shifted uneasily. He knew Dante wasn't bluffing. For the first time, the balance of fear shifted, and it shifted away from Russo. "Fine," Russo said finally. "You want to blow it all up? Then we'll end this on my terms." He nodded to his men. "Fall back." The soldiers retreated, dragging Ethan with them. Russo lingered in the doorway. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The blood between our families runs too deep for peace." Then he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya collapsed against the wall, her legs shaking. "You would have done it," she whispered. "You would have killed us all." "If it meant keeping you out of his hands," Dante said. "Yes." It was reckless. It was insane. And it was the first time she truly understood the depth of his resolve. This wasn't just a war anymore. It was a reckoning. As the echoes of footsteps faded above them, Dante turned back to the safe. Behind the detonator, buried beneath false panels, was the real ledger, a leather-bound book that pulsed with decades of secrets. He handed it to her. "This is our weapon now," he said. "Every name, every deal, every betrayal. If we use it right, we can end this without another drop of blood." But deep down, Maya knew better. Blood was the currency of their world. And before this was over, more would be spilled. And somewhere in the darkness above them, Russo was already planning his next move. The storm over Manhattan had not broken, but the city itself seemed to be holding its breath. The detonator still sat cold and silent on the table, its threat unspent, its promise unresolved. Maya stared at it, her heartbeat heavy in her chest, while Dante paced the room with the restless energy of a man standing on the edge of war. Everything had changed in a single night. Russo was no longer a distant threat. He was coming. And now they had a weapon that could destroy his empire from the inside, or destroy them if it fell into the wrong hands. "What happens now?" Maya asked quietly, watching the rain race down the window. "He won't stop." "No," Dante said, pausing to look at her. "He won't. Which is why we don't wait for him to make the next move. We make it first." He opened the ledger on the table, pages of names, accounts, blood debts, and alliances laid bare. "These are the men who keep Russo's empire alive. Politicians, bankers, judges, police commissioners. If we leak this, it's over for him. And for you," Maya said. "If this goes public, they won't stop with Russo. They'll come for the entire Moretti family." "Let them," Dante said, a fire in his voice that was colder than rage. "I'm done hiding behind my father's sins. This ends now." Before Maya could respond, The lights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the safe house. Only the rain and the distant wail of a siren cut through the silence. Dante's hand went immediately to his gun. "They found us!" A heartbeat later, the windows shattered. Glass exploded inward as armed men in tactical gear poured through the breach. Bullets tore through the air, sparks flying as they struck steel. Dante grabbed Maya, dragging her behind a concrete pillar as gunfire roared around them. "Get down!" he shouted over the chaos. "Stay with me!" "Who are they?" she screamed. "Not Russo," Dante hissed, firing back with lethal precision. "This is bigger. This is government." The realization hit her like a punch. It wasn't just a mafia war anymore. The feds had come. Flashbangs detonated, flooding the room with light and sound. Maya's ears rang, her vision blurring as figures in black swarmed through the room. Dante fired until his clip clicked empty, then slammed another magazine into place. But there were too many. Within seconds, the safe house was surrounded. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," a voice roared. "Drop your weapon, Dante Marino. You are uncan. Dare arrest!" Dante froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. His eyes darted to Maya. "If they take me, they'll use you. They'll use everything." "Then we run," she whispered. "There's no time," he said. "There's only one way out." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. Not a detonator this time, but a transmitter. "What is that?" "Insurance," he said. "I built this in case I ever needed to disappear." "Disappear?" Maya echoed. "Dante, what are you talking about?" Before he could answer, the steel door blew off its hinges. Dozens of red lasers lit up the room. Dante grabbed Maya's hand and pulled her through a narrow hallway toward a hidden elevator. Bullets ricocheted behind them. They burst into the underground tunnel beneath the safe house, a labyrinth of forgotten subway lines and maintenance shafts. The noise above faded, replaced by the hiss of steam and the echo of distant footsteps. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, breathless. "Somewhere no one will find us," Dante said. "Not Russo, not the feds, not even my father." They emerged into the catacombs beneath the city, a network known only to the oldest members of the syndicate. The air was cold and damp, the walls marked with symbols older than the family itself. But they weren't alone. A figure stepped out of the shadows, clapping slowly. "You always did know how to make an exit, cousin." Marco. His suit was immaculate despite the filth of the tunnels, his smile sharp as a blade. Behind him, armed men emerged from the darkness. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Marco said. "Now I'll finish what our fathers started." "You betrayed blood," Dante growled. "No," Marco said. "I claimed it. And when Russo is gone, when the feds are gone, I will wear the crown. And she," he gestured at Maya, "will be the price you pay for standing in my way." The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. Maya could feel Dante trembling beside her, not with fear, but with fury. He had spent his life fighting enemies from the outside. He had never imagined the deadliest one would come from within. "Walk away, Marco," Dante warned. "I'm giving you one chance." "Or what?" Marco sneered. "You'll kill me? Then you'll never know the truth about your father's last order." Dante's heart stopped. "What order?" Marco smiled. "The one that sealed her father's fate." The words froze Maya's blood. "What did he just say?" "You heard me," Marco said. "Giovanni didn't just know about your father's death. He commanded it. He made the call himself. And he told me to make sure no one ever found out." The tunnel seemed to tilt around her. Every breath felt heavier than the last. Dante's father, the man he had sworn to destroy, was the one who had taken everything from her before she even had a chance to understand it. Dante's face was pale, his eyes burning with betrayal and rage. "If that's true," he said, his voice trembling with fury, "then this ends with his blood." Marco laughed softly. "Then you're more like him than you think." The tunnels erupted in gunfire. Concrete shattered. Sparks danced off steel. Maya was thrown against the wall as Dante tackled Marco to the ground. Years of rage, grief, and betrayal collided in a brutal struggle. When it was over, Marco lay unconscious, blood pooling beneath him. Dante stood over his fallen cousin, chest heaving, hands shaking. "It's over," Maya whispered. "No," Dante said, his voice low and certain. "It's just beginning. If my father gave that order, I will burn everything he's ever built to the ground." Maya stepped closer, touching his arm. "And me?" He turned to her, his eyes softer now. "You're the reason I'll survive it." Above them, the storm raged harder, lightning splitting the sky. Somewhere in the darkness, Giovanni Moretti, the man who had started it all, was waiting, and Dante was coming for him. This wasn't just a war for power anymore. It was a war for truth, and the reckoning was closer than anyone dared imagine. The city didn't sleep the night Dante learned the truth. It pulsed like a living thing, its veins lit by the glow of sirens and secrets, and somewhere inside its iron heart, a man who had built an empire on blood waited for the son who was coming to destroy him. Maya felt it in the air, a storm that wasn't in the clouds but in the streets, in the whispers of men who had chosen sides, in the glances of strangers who seemed to know more than they should. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a countdown. And when it reached 0, nothing would survive unchanged. They had spent 2 days in the tunnels beneath the city, moving like ghosts. Marco was gone, taken by the FBI or Russo's men, or perhaps by the shadows themselves. But his words had detonated something far more dangerous than a bullet ever could. Giovanni Moretti had ordered her father's death. That truth had carved a hole inside Dante so deep, Maya wasn't sure anything could fill it again. "Tell me we're not walking into a suicide mission," Maya said, as Dante assembled weapons on the table of their makeshift hideout. His movements were methodical, deliberate. There was no fear in him now, only purpose. "If this is suicide," he said, loading a magazine, "then I intend to take the devil with me." "You mean your father," she said quietly. "I mean the man who stole everything from both of us," he replied. "The man who thinks blood means obedience. Tonight, I show him blood can mean justice." Before she could respond, Rocco burst through the door, rain dripping from his coat, urgency written across his face. "They're gathering," he said. "Giovanni called an emergency council. Every capo, every lieutenant, every loyalist is meeting at the old opera house in Brooklyn." "Then that's where we end this," Dante said. Rocco hesitated. "There's something else. Russo's dead." Maya blinked. "What?" "Found shot in the head this morning. Single bullet. No witnesses," Rocco said grimly. "The streets are already saying Giovanni ordered it. He's tying off every loose end before tonight." Dante's jaw tightened. "Then we're next." The ride to the opera house felt like driving toward a destiny neither of them had chosen. Rain streaked the windows, the city's neon lights warping into a blur of red and blue. Maya stared out at the passing streets, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. Could love survive betrayal this deep? Could redemption exist for a man born of violence? The opera house loomed ahead like a cathedral built for sin. It was beautiful in a decaying, haunted way, its grand columns cracked, its steps slick with rain. Armed guards lined the entrance. They didn't try to stop Dante. They stepped aside. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and silence. The men who had once feared Giovanni now sat like disciples awaiting their god. And on the stage beneath a single spotlight, Giovanni Moretti stood with the calm of a man who believed he was untouchable. "My son," Giovanni said, his voice carrying across the empty theater. "You finally decided to come home." "This isn't home," Dante said, stepping into the light. "It's a tomb." Giovanni's smile was cold. "Then kneel, and I will spare you the burial." The room erupted in laughter. Maya stood at the edge of the stage, her pulse racing, her eyes locked on the man who had stolen her father's life. She wanted to scream, to throw the ledger in his face, to make him feel the weight of what he'd done. but Dante's hand brushed hers, a silent plea to let him speak first. "You killed Thomas Rivera," Dante said, voice steady and strong. "You ordered it because he tried to leave, because he knew too much." Giovanni tilted his head, almost amused. "I did what was necessary." "You murdered an innocent man, Maya shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. Giovanni's gaze drifted to her, unbothered. "There are no innocents in our world, child, only liabilities, and your father was one." The words shattered something inside her. Dante stepped closer, the rage in his chest barely contained. "You killed him to protect your empire, and now that empire dies with you." Giovanni spread his arms. "You think you can kill me in front of all these men and still walk out alive? Look around you, boy. These are not soldiers. They are wolves, and they only kneel for the strongest." "Then let's see who they kneel for when the truth comes out," Dante said. He tossed the ledger onto the floor. Pages spilled open, names and deals laid bare. Gasps rippled through the room as secrets, generations old, were exposed. Giovanni's mask slipped. "You don't know what you've done. I've given them a choice," Dante said. "Stay loyal to a murderer, or build something better." The room erupted into chaos. Shouts, guns drawn, loyalties cracking like glass. One of the older capos rose to his feet and spat at Giovanni's feet. "You lied to us. You made us killers for your greed." Another shouted, "We follow the blood, not the butcher." Giovanni's composure faltered. He reached for his gun, but Dante was faster. The shot rang out like a thunderclap, and Giovanni stumbled back, blood blooming across his shoulder. Screams filled the theater. Maya ducked as bullets tore through the air. Rocco returned fire from the balcony. "Go!" Dante shouted, grabbing her hand. They ran through the chaos, weaving between gunfire and bodies. Outside, rain hammered the street. Tires screeched as cars roared into the alley. The war had begun. Maya gasped as Dante pulled her into a waiting car. "Did you kill him?" "No," Dante said, his chest heaving. "But I made sure he remembers what betrayal feels like." "Where do we go now?" she asked. "To finish it," Dante said, staring out at the burning city. "One last move, Maya, then it's over." But as the car sped into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing was over, not yet. Giovanni was wounded, not dead. And wounded animals were always the most dangerous. Somewhere in the shadows of New York, the final act was waiting to be written, and blood would write every line. The night after the opera house felt like the end of the world. Sirens screamed through the streets. Fires burned in districts that had slept peacefully for decades. The Moretti Empire, once untouchable, was bleeding from every corner, and Dante knew that was only the beginning. Giovanni was wounded but alive, and a man like him did not forgive, did not forget. He retaliated, and when he did, he brought the full weight of hell with him. By dawn, the first message arrived. A car bomb outside one of Dante's legitimate businesses. At noon, one of their allies was found dead, a single bullet to the back of the head. At sunset, a package arrived at the safe house. Inside was a single bullet casing and a note written in Giovanni's precise handwriting. "Blood remembers." "He's declaring war," Rocco said, slamming the note onto the table. "No," Dante replied, his voice low and cold. "This is his funeral march. He's not trying to win anymore. He's trying to take everything down with him." Maya stood by the window, staring at the rain-slick streets below. Her heart had been breaking piece by piece since the truth about her father came out. But this was different. This was terror. And yet beneath it, a spark of something else. Defiance. "How does this end?" she asked quietly. "Does one of you die? Do both of you?" "It ends," Dante said, holstering his weapon. "When he's gone. Forever." They spent the next 48 hours preparing for a final confrontation. Contacts were called. Safe houses were evacuated. Allies were warned or bribed or threatened into choosing sides. Dante moved, like a man with nothing left to lose, and Maya watched him with equal parts fear and awe. He wasn't the same man who had offered her a seat on a private jet weeks ago. He was harder now, sharper, and yet beneath it all, she could still see the man who had once said kindness was strength. The final message came through a burner phone just before midnight. A meeting request, one location, one condition. Come alone. It's a trap, Rocco said. I know, Dante replied. But it's the only way to finish this. Maya stepped forward. Then I'm coming with you. No, Dante said, his voice breaking for the first time. If this goes wrong, I need to know you're safe. I need to know that everything I did meant something. Then let me be the reason it does, she whispered. We end this together. Or we don't end it at all. For a long moment, he just looked at her, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with something deeper than love. Then, finally, he nodded. Together. The address led them to the ruins of an old shipyard on the Hudson, a place that smelled of rust and ghosts. Armed men flanked the perimeter, but none raised their weapons as Dante and Maya walked through the gates. At the center of the yard, beneath a dying floodlight, stood Giovanni Moretti. He was alone, no soldiers, no allies, just a cane, a gun at his hip, and the weight of a lifetime carved into the lines of his face. You should have killed me when you had the chance, Giovanni said, his voice carrying easily over the rain. I came to end this, Dante replied. Then pull the trigger, Giovanni said. Be the son who kills his father. Fulfill the prophecy. I'm not you, Dante said. I don't build legacies on blood. Giovanni laughed, cold and bitter. Then you are weak, and weakness dies. In a flash, he drew his weapon. Dante moved faster. The shot echoed across the shipyard, the recoil snapping throw. Ugh, the air. Giovanni staggered, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. But he didn't fall. You think this ends with me? He hissed. It never ends. The council will rise. The families will fight. You'll spend the rest of your life running from ghosts. Then I'll burn the ghosts too, Dante said. Giovanni raised his weapon again, but this time Maya stepped forward. Her voice was steady, her hands unshaking. No, you won't. She held the ledger in her hands, its pages torn and soaked from the rain. And then, before anyone could stop her, she dropped it into a puddle of gasoline near the dock and struck a match. Flames roared to life, devouring decades of secrets, sins, and power. Giovanni screamed in rage, lunging toward the fire, but Dante held him back. It's over, Dante said. Without the ledger, your empire is nothing. Your leverage is gone. Your power is gone. Giovanni stared at the flames, and for the first time, something in his eyes cracked. Fear, defeat, mortality. He sank to his knees, rain and blood mixing beneath him. You think you're free, he spat, but blood remembers, and it will come for you. Then let it come, Dante said. We'll be waiting. The old man looked up at his son one last time. I built this world for you, he whispered. And I'll bury it for her, Dante replied. Giovanni's strength failed, and he collapsed onto the wet concrete. By the time the police arrived, drawn by the explosion and the gunfire, the godfather of New York was dead. Weeks later, the headlines told a story the city would never forget. The Moretti empire dismantled, high-ranking officials arrested, hidden networks exposed. For the first time in decades, the city breathed without fear. And in a small town on the coast of Italy, 2 people started over. Maya opened a small clinic by the sea. Dante worked at a vineyard, his hands stained with earth instead of blood. They spoke often of the past, not as a chain but as a lesson, and when the wind carried the scent of salt in summer, they spoke of the future too. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't stopped that night at the airport? She asked one morning as they watched the sunrise. Every day, he said, and every day I'm grateful I did. Do you ever worry the past will come for us? It might, he said, but we're not running anymore. She smiled, leaning into his chest as the sun broke over the horizon. They had burned the sins of their fathers. They had buried the ghosts. And now, in a world that had once tried to destroy them, they were free to write their own story. Love could not erase the past, but it could build a future that no bloodline could control. And in that truth, they finally found peace. The end.